My name is Frank Miller. I'm 65 years old, and 11 months ago, I asked my only son to sell my car so I could afford heart surgery. What I didn't know yet was that the money from that car was about to buy his girlfriend a shopping spree instead of buying me a second chance at life. Before I get into it, hit subscribe if you're new here, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight. I read every one of them. Now let me tell you what happened. My wife, Margaret, passed away 14 months ago. Ovarian cancer, the kind they catch too late because it doesn't announce itself until it's already made itself at home. We were married for 39 years. I still, some mornings, reach over to her side of the bed before I remember. About 2 months before she died, when she still had enough strength to leave the house on good days, Margaret insisted we go down to a used car lot outside of Millersburg, Ohio, where we'd lived our whole married life. She'd been saving a little money quietly for years. I never knew how much until she showed me the account, and she used almost all of it to buy me a clean, low-mileage 2015 Bic La Crosse. Dark blue, leather seats, the kind of car a woman picks out for a man she knows is going to be driving to a lot of doctor's appointments alone before too long. So you won't be lonely on the road, she told me, handing me the keys in the parking lot, both of us crying and trying to pretend we weren't. This car's going to take care of you when I can't. I had no idea, sitting in that lot, how literally those words were going to come true. My son, Ryan, is 29. Good-looking kid, works in sales for a company 2 towns over, and for the last year and a half he's been dating a woman named Jessica. Nice enough when I've met her, though something about the way Ryan changes around her has always made me a little uneasy. He calls me less since they got serious. He used to stop by on Sundays. Now it's every 3rd Sunday, if that. 11 months ago, I started having chest pains that wouldn't quit. Turned out to be worse than I let on to Ryan at first, 3 blocked arteries, and my cardiologist, Dr. Osei, told me flat out I needed bypass surgery within the month or I was looking at a heart attack that might not give me a second warning. The problem was money. My insurance through my old job at the plant covered a good chunk, but the out-of-pocket portion, nearly $11,000 due before they'd even scheduled the surgery, was more than I had sitting anywhere. I'd already used most of my savings on Margaret's care in her last year. I wasn't going to touch what little was left in case I didn't make it through surgery and needed something for my own funeral, God forbid, so my son wouldn't be stuck with that bill too. So I called Ryan and I asked him for a favor I hated asking for. I need you to sell the Bic, I told him over the phone, sitting in my recliner with my hand pressed against my own chest like I could hold the ache still by force of will. Your mother's car? I know what it means. Believe me, I know. But I need that money for the surgery, and I need it fast. Ryan was quiet for a second on the phone. Then he said, Dad, don't worry about a thing. I'll take care of it. I know a guy who buys and sells. I'll get you a fair price, maybe better than fair. You just focus on getting ready for the surgery. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. I handed him the title, the keys, and I told him, only half joking, check the glove box and under the seats before you hand it over. Your mother was always tucking things away in strange places. I didn't think much more of it. I had a surgery to prepare for. Ryan picked up the car on a Tuesday. He texted me that evening, sold it. Got you $9,200, better than I thought. Bringing the cash by tomorrow after work, promise. I sat in my kitchen that night looking at that text, feeling, for the first time in weeks, like I could actually breathe. $9,200. Enough, with what little I had left, to cover the surgery. I called Dr. Osei's office the next morning and told them to schedule me. They gave me a date, 12 days out. Tomorrow after work came and went. Ryan didn't show. I texted him that night, "Everything okay? Just checking on that money whenever you get a chance, no rush." I added, "No rush, because that's the kind of father I've always tried to be, the kind who doesn't make his son feel cornered, even when something in my gut had already started to twist." He wrote back an hour later, "Sorry Dad, got caught up, Jessica had a thing come up. I'll swing by this weekend for sure." I didn't know yet that a thing meant Jessica had found a dress she loved at an outlet mall 2 hours away, that she'd called Ryan crying about how she never gets nice things and how everyone else's boyfriend takes them shopping, and that my son, with $9,200 of his dying mother's memory sitting in his bank account, had gotten in his car that same night and driven 2 hours to hand his girlfriend a credit card and tell her to get whatever she wanted. I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew, sitting in my kitchen with my surgery date circled on the calendar and 12 days quietly ticking down, was that my son had said, "this weekend," and the weekend was still 4 days away, and something in my chest, and I don't mean the blocked arteries, had already started to feel very, very cold. The weekend came. Ryan didn't. He texted Saturday morning, "So sorry Dad, Jessica's sister is in town, family stuff, I'll come Monday for sure, swear." I read that text 3 times, sitting at my kitchen table with the surgery paperwork spread out in front of me, the number $11,000 circled in red pen, and 8 days now left on the calendar. I called him. He didn't pick up. I called again that evening. Straight to voicemail. By Monday, with 7 days left before my surgery date and the hospital's billing office calling twice to remind me the deposit was due before they'd confirm the operating room, I finally understood, the way you understand a cold has turned into pneumonia, slowly and then all at once, that my son was not coming with that money. Not because something had happened to him. Because something else had simply become more important than I was. I want to tell you I called him and screamed. I didn't. I sat in Margaret's old armchair by the window, the one she used to read in every evening, and I thought about what she would have wanted me to do. And I remembered the ring. Margaret's engagement ring had been her grandmother's before it was hers, a genuine diamond, appraised years ago at just over $6,000, though what it was actually worth to me had never had a number on it. Before she died, Margaret had taken it off her own hand, pressed it into mine, and said, "Frank, I want you to keep this. But if you ever need it, really need it, not just want it, you sell it. Don't you dare let pride keep you in a box next to me before your time. Promise me." I'd promised her without really believing I'd ever have to keep that promise. I drove myself to a jeweler on Main Street in Millersburg, a small, honest shop that had been there since before Ryan was born, run by a man named Sal who'd known Margaret and me for over 20 years. I set that ring on his counter with a hand that was shaking harder than it had any right to, given how many decisions I'd made in my life. Sal looked at the ring, looked at me, and I think he understood without me having to explain much at all. "Frank," he said quietly, "you sure about this?" "My wife told me to," I said. "Told me exactly this situation, if you can believe it." Sal gave me $6,500 for it, more than fair, and I think, looking back, a little more than the ring alone was worth, because Sal knew Margaret, and Sal understood what kind of week I was having even though I never said the words, "my son," once in that shop. Combined with what little I'd kept back for myself, it was enough. I called the hospital that same afternoon and confirmed the deposit. I had my surgery 6 days later. Triple bypass, 4.5 hours on the table. Dr. Osei told me afterward it had gone about as well as it possibly could have. I woke up in recovery alone, no family in the waiting room, because I hadn't told Ryan the date. I honestly didn't know, by that point, whether he'd show up even if I had. He found out I'd already had the surgery through my neighbor, Carol, who he ran into at the pharmacy. He showed up at the hospital that evening, guilt written all over his face in a way I hadn't seen since he was about 9 years old and had broken his mother's favorite lamp playing baseball in the house. "Dad, I'm so sorry, I meant to bring the money, things just kept happening, Where's the money, Ryan?" I said. Not angry. Just tired. Just done pretending I didn't already know. He was quiet a long moment and then he told me the truth, at least, I'll give him that much. About Jessica, the outlet mall, the 2 hours he'd driven, the money he'd spent on her before he'd ever brought me a single dollar of it. There was still some of it left, he said, holding out an envelope with just over $3,000 in it, like that was somehow going to fix something. I already had the surgery, I told him, and I watched his face go through about 4 different emotions before landing on the one that mattered, real shame, finally, the kind that doesn't come from getting caught, but from understanding what you actually did. I sold your mother's ring, Ryan. The one her grandmother gave her. The one she made me promise never to let go of unless it was life or death. That's how I paid for this. He started crying right there in the hospital hallway, and for a moment I almost, let myself comfort him the way I always had, the reflex of 30 years of being his father overriding everything else. But I didn't. I just let him sit with it. About 3 weeks later, while I was still recovering at home, I got a phone call from a woman named Denise, who told me she and her husband had bought a Bic Lacrosse from a private seller a couple weeks back, my Bic, it turned out, the one Ryan had sold. She said while cleaning it out, her husband had found a small zippered pouch tucked up under the driver's seat, wedged into a gap most people would never think to check. Inside was an envelope with my name on it, in Margaret's handwriting. Denise could have kept whatever was in there. She didn't know me from anyone. But she tracked down my information through the old title paperwork and drove 25 minutes out of her way to bring it to me herself, because, she said, it just felt like something somebody needed to have. Inside that envelope was $400 in cash Margaret must have tucked away without ever telling me, and a letter, dated just a few weeks before she passed. In it, she told me she loved me. She told me not to be afraid of growing old without her. And near the end, she wrote something I think about every single day now, Frank, if it ever comes down to it, things are just things. Even the ring. Even this car. The only thing I ever needed you to hold onto was yourself. Please, for me, hold onto yourself. I sat in my kitchen with that letter for a long time. I want to tell you, Ryan, and I fixed everything after that, tied it up neat with a bow the way these things go in the stories you hear. We didn't, not really, not yet, anyway. He calls more now. He's paying me back a little each month, money I honestly don't need as much as I need to see whether he's actually become the kind of man who follows through, or whether that was just guilt talking in a hospital hallway. Jessica, for what it's worth, isn't in the picture anymore. I don't know all the details of that, and I didn't ask. What I do know is this, I buried my wife's ring story alongside a lot of complicated feelings about my son, but I got to keep her letter instead, the one thing that couldn't be sold, spent, or taken by anybody but me. And some nights, that feels like the better trade after all. If this story got to you the way it got to me telling it, hit that like button, subscribe to Dad Law Story if you're not already part of the family here, and let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from tonight? I read every single one. See you in the next story.